Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here. This is going to be a slightly erratic session, I suspect. I'm assuming everyone can see my slides.
Yep, all good.
Wonderful, great. So I would like to begin just by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land from which I come to you today, the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I have been working in education design and education technology since 2003 across higher education and vet. I actually worked with Ben Waller, who was one of the presenters on Monday at Canberra Institute of Technology for some time. I've got a background in education, bachelor's, master's, and done a whole bunch of things, but I will confess I have not explicitly taught English. So I've actually found the last few days fascinating just to get a little bit more insight into what it is that you do. So my thinking with the session today was really going to be to just share some things that I found of interest that you may find beneficial in terms of using technology in language learning and teaching. I'll have a few questions for you as well, because I'm curious to see how you address some of these things. I have seen a bit of discussion about Duolingo in the last few days, and look, obviously it's not going to replace the experience of learning and teaching with actual teachers, but I do have a streak of 563 days that I'm very possessive of, and it keeps me going in French. So I was curious to start out very quickly with a poll question, which I believe Sophie has organised. If you could just pop that up for me. Wonderful. Yeah, so I really just wanted to get a sense. I mean, the LMS is kind of everywhere, but I do understand that some people are working in institutions, some people are working in private colleges. So really just curious to get a sense of what your one of your main platforms actually is. So I'll just leave this up for a few more seconds. Not sure if responses are coming through. Ooh, Incenti. Okay, that's a new one. I haven't come across that one before. All right. So do we have a result? Okay, Teams. A lot of love for Teams here. I believe Teams has been a bit flaky today, so I hope that hasn't impacted your teaching experience too much. Moodle, Canvas, Blackboard. Yep. Okay. Okay. All right. Good. This is helpful. This gives me a sense of just where you are to begin with. So, I mean, my understanding of language teaching is you can really break it up into two parts. There's obviously the multimedia, the learning, the listening and the speaking bit, and then there's the writing and the reading bit. So in terms of the listening and the speaking part, a couple of things that I've just found that I really enjoyed. I spend a lot of time on TikTok. I mutton dressed as lamb or whatever, but I found some really useful just micro content that I found really good. This is one of those. I'm just going to play this.
Learn to say don't mind like a native French speaker. In written French, it's ça ne me dérange pas. Nobody says that. It sounds like a robot. Just remove ne, we don't say it. Remove i from me, and just say ça me dérange pas.
So incredibly punchy, really fast. Basically changes there's like 7 shots in a 24-second video with that, but gets across like this really interesting sort of native speaker perspective on the language. And I just found that really interesting. Um,
Learn to say don't mind, like
we don't need to see that again. Which of course, I guess, brings us to the idea of, okay, well, that's great, but how do we go about making these videos? One of the tools that I found, I come from a video background, and obviously, so I'm very excited about the idea of and the power of audio and video in teaching. But as a person responsible for supporting educators, I've always had at the back of my mind, well, that's great, but it needs to be something that people, with a relatively low level of technological confidence or, experience or whatever can start with if it's actually going to be successful. So when I found this tool, the script, I'm not being paid for any of these things, by the way, I was quite impressed. So what I like about the script, I'll just show you actually how it works.
There are two main ways to edit your content in Descript: the script view and the timeline view. In the script, you just cut, copy, paste, and delete text, and it'll edit the underlying audio or video. And editing in the timeline works a lot like it does in other timeline editors. But wherever you edit, you're editing the same thing. The two views stay in sync. They're just different ways of looking at your content. So when to use which view? As a general rule, the script is great for basic edits because it's fast and intuitive, and the timeline is good for fine-tuning edits when you need to, which shouldn't be that much.
So yeah, so essentially what you do is you take your recording, and you can either just record directly into the app or you can upload it. It transcribes it, and instead of having to use a conventional video editor, you basically just treat it like text editing. I don't know, for me, this feels like a game changer. So I've been very excited about this. We've certainly been looking at this recently. The other thing that's happened in the last few weeks with the script is they've added some new functionality. They've basically redesigned their video editor. And this is what it looks like now.
Let me start by just telling you how scenes work. You start out with your recording, which is represented by words instead of clips on a timeline. Then you divide it up into scenes using the slash key. You just add a slash anywhere you want the visuals to change somehow, and you'll see the scenes popping up in the margin of the script. This gives us something that's kind of like a mix between a slide deck and a doc. Now, if I want to overlay an image, that's a scene, so I just drag it on that section of the script. If I want to add a video, it's the same thing. And the video is trimmed so that it's contained within the scene. I can then tune the positioning of the video within the scene. Same thing if I want to add a lower thirds title. I just add a rectangle and a text clip to this scene. That's it. You get the power that you've come to expect from the best timeline-based editors, but the familiar experience of using docs or PowerPoint slides.
Again, for me, that is just a very exciting way of changing the way that we work with video. Okay, good. Yeah, there was there was a bit in the chat. Someone was not able to hear that, which would not have been helpful. But apparently, yeah, it is working for people, so that's good. Yeah, look, I am very that functionality specifically has not been rolled out yet, so I'm on like the beta list or whatever to start playing with that. But once I get access to that, yeah, I'll certainly be having a bit of a dive into.
Let me start by just telling you how.
Stop that. So obviously there's the content, there's the production of resources that the educator does. But the other side of this is obviously getting your students producing content and, producing resources as well. So I did come across this this quite nice paper from Ye and et al. I will say these slides, I'll share a link to these at the end of the session. So if you are interested in following up any of these things, you will be able to access that. But yeah, so this paper basically kind of steps through what it is exactly about having your students create podcasts that they're really getting the benefit from. And most of it really just comes from this metacognitive kind of processes. So not just learning, but thinking about their learning. And so they've broken that up into 4 stages. Planning is obviously just getting out, having a listen to other podcasts, to understand how they work. Monitoring is actually when you start to create it, and you're checking your revisions, and you're just being aware of what it is that you're actually producing. Evaluating is getting feedback from your teacher or from your peers, and then revising is kind of going through this iterative process of actually making your recording. So there's so much going on in the chat. I will come back to the chat, but yes, this looks great. So yeah, this was just this kind of summed up for me what some of the real strengths of using this kind of technology in language learning was. But just very quickly, I am curious to know whether there's anything exciting that you are managing to do in your use of audio or video or listening or speaking exercises. So maybe if you are doing something, just pop that in the chat. This question is script free. It's a premium model, so you can use it. There is a free level, but basically I think you get an hour a month of transcription and basic editing. And then if you want more time, then you need to start paying. But I think we looked at it and it was about $30 US a month for about 30 hours of transcription. SpeakPipe, okay. All right, I will take a little bit of a look at that one. Can Descript provide transcriptions of videos as well? Yeah, absolutely it does. Could be really interesting, as well as content created by students. Yeah, and I think, I mean, again, coming back just to this idea of technology is fantastic, but if the learning curve is, too great, it, adds all of this cognitive load when you really want people to be focusing on the matter at hand. So for me, I'm quite excited about this kind of technology because it is something that people are already really familiar with. Creative Cloud, Fockaroo, okay, great, fantastic. Let's keep moving. I am conscious of time. So moving on from that, on the reading and writing side, something that something that I think gets under discussed a little bit in education technology kind of gatherings is feedback and assessment. I'll really only sort of touch on this very briefly because it's another tool that we've been using at Monash, and I've been really impressed kind of just with the thinking behind it. So obviously, we're all kind of, pretty aware of what impact feedback can have on students. David Bowd has done a lot of work, particularly on how you make feedback more meaningful. And a big part of that is the fact that it doesn't just stop with the student does the work and the teacher tells them, hey, that was good, or hey, why don't you fix that, or whatever. There are these other sort of steps that need to come afterwards where the student actually reflects on that process or, sort of engages with their peers on that process and comes up with something actionable that will have a meaningful impact after, in subsequent work. So Feedback Fruits is a series of tools by this, I think they're a Dutch company, and essentially it creates these kind of stepped workflows. Certainly, yeah. Honestly, I jump on their website. They have some really informative, really useful videos. You may well have it in your institution already. Just worth taking a look at. And this is kind of basically what it looks like. There's this kind of series of processes, and you'll say, okay, so you need to do this by Thursday, and then you need to do this by, next Tuesday, and so on and so forth. AI, there's been a little bit of discussion. The session yesterday on bots, just absolutely loved that. This is actually AI art, and I've just been having a ball with AI art recently. So there's a number of tools out there. where you can basically just go to a website, feed in a text prompt, and the computer will go, well, this is what I think that might look like. That's a pretty gross oversimplification of how it all works. But I mean, in terms of language learning, I just thought it might actually be a really fun exercise to do with your students. Obviously, you know, they need to generate the language for the prompts, and you can just create these insane sort of resources that come out of that. So that's the fun side. That's the interesting side of AI. There's this whole other side going on, which I'm sure, you know, people have been talking about. So the other part of it, obviously, is AI-generated text. One of the most well-known of these platforms is something called GPT-3 from a company or from an organization called OpenAI.com. And I'm just going to show you a little demonstration of how quick this can work. So I put in a prompt question. I just wanted it to write something very quickly. How will AI writing change English language teaching? And you can see my cursor's up here, moves down. I submit that prompt. This starts generating text almost immediately. Obviously, that's probably going to be a little bit hard to read, but grammatically perfect, flows, makes sense, all of these things. And so I was like, okay, well, that's fine, but how do I know that this isn't just, you know, ripped off Wikipedia or something like that? So being the person that I am, I ran it through Turnitin, and it only got a 9% match to one paper for a very generic statement. There is no one size fits all answer to this question. So this is unique, hasn't been dragged from anywhere else on the internet text. So obviously, I mean, you know, and for people, you know, sort of with a language other than English, maybe this is a little bit more advanced than the level of communication that you'd be expecting to get from them. But you can certainly see that the creation of text without intervention from the student is something I don't know what we do about it, but it's out there, and you know the genie's out of the bottle. So just something to be mindful of as much as anything. On the other side of this, there are also there's a growing number of tools, and I'm sure you've come across them, Grammarly and, you know, a bunch really, that are now claiming to provide automated feedback and, you know, sort of do basic assessment. I mean, at some point, we're going to get to a point where students use the computer to write their essay, and the teacher uses their computer to grade the essay, and I don't know if people are even needed anymore. So the kinds of things that these tools are using are, you know, grammar, how the language is used, basic mechanics, style, you know, so it's significant. It's obviously a very important part of communication. But what the human part of grading actually brings, and this is from another paper from Gardner, O'Leary, and Wan, is there is still a need for, like, computers can't analyze the rhetorical knowledge, the critical thinking, the writing process, and, you know, that kind of deeper level. But again, it's out there and it's coming. So yeah, it's something to be aware of, I think, as much as anything. Again, so just very curious, and maybe there's been a bit of chatter in here. Are there technologies? Is there something really exciting that you are finding that you're using with learning and with reading and writing? Got a comment. So about 80% of my student base are adults who are asked by the employer to come get language support training because they aren't allowed to use Grammarly or similar tools at work for security reasons. Word tune. Okay. All right. I think I'm pretty close to time. I'm, obviously I have an interest just in how technology can mediate learning and teaching in any space. Hopefully I've shown you some things that may be of interest. Certainly happy to talk further about any of those things. If you're on Twitter, please feel free to contact me there. And the slides should now be up on my blog at screenface.net. And turn it in for checking. Yeah, absolutely.